Ferries are common all over the world. They transport people across large bodies of water, whether it be across the beautiful Rhine River or even overnight to various destinations. Ferries are the backbone of any water-based transport network, so you'd expect said networks to obey the regulations and care for the ships to keep the network as safe as possible. However, the ferry industry is a notoriously corrupt one, considering I just talked about corruption in my last Unsolved video. This is a topic that'll appear a lot in ship disasters. And the disaster of the MV La Joola in Senegal is no different. The country of Senegal is a pretty weirdly shaped one. It's in a C shape, entirely encompassing the country of the Gambia. Previously, border crossings from one part of Senegal to the other hadn't been that hard considering border walls didn't even exist. However, by the 80s, the Gambia was stepping up its police force and its military, so it began to secure its borders, building border walls, and establishing a pretty decent police force in African standards. The country was becoming divided as one half was easier to get to than the other, so the government ordered a ferry to go from the capital of Dakar to various ports in the south of Senegal. The ship began its design work in 1985, and eventually, in 1990, it would be handed over to the Senegalese government and named the La Joola, named for the Joola people of the south of the country. The ship's biggest problem, however, was its instability. The ship often lurched to one side, and although it wasn't an issue for passengers, it was usually something discussed by crew members. In fact, in its entire life, the La Joola never had a single dry dock. Although the ship was undoubtedly the most beautiful ferry in the country and looked quite nice for ferry standards, she wasn't operating well, and due to corruption, the ship carried more than usually scheduled. See, if you were a passenger with maybe just some luggage or whatever, you could board free because it was a government-subsidized ferry. However, if you were bringing your car or some cargo, which people often were, you'd have to pay. Because of the fact that most of them weren't carrying cargo, however, they wanted to squeeze as many cargo carriers into the ship as possible to make a lot of money, so people were being let on without being offered into the manifest, or without even paying. Finally, in 2001, conditions were being documented aboard the unmaintained ship, so it went into dry dock in France. During this time, the government was under pressure to have it back in service because the southern region of Senegal is very agriculturally fertile. So when she finally returned to service, the ship was overloaded most of its trips, and did not carry all of the passengers on the ship's manifest. On September 26, 2002, the La Joola left the port of Ziguinchor. The ship had a capacity for 500 people, but over 1,000 tickets had been sold. And this doesn't include all of the children under 5 who didn't need a ticket, or the stowaways who got on through bribes. Around 8 hours after the ship had departed Ziguinchor, she was off the coast of the Gambia and was sailing through a bit of a storm. Due to the fact that on one of the outside decks, one side of the ship had slightly more rain coverage than the other, people who couldn't find a place to sleep and were on the outside of the ship crowded all to one side, giving it a slight list of about 5 degrees. However, this began another problem, and that was that the cargo on the ship began listing to one side, including the cars and the containers. Due to this, water began spilling into the portholes, and the ship then developed an over 15-degree list. As the ship began to list, it made more passengers wary, so more passengers began to head to the top decks. This gave the ship even more of a list, increasing its list all the way to 20 degrees, which was the point of no return. Water began flooding in through the portholes rapidly, until finally, the ship capsized. Thankfully for passengers, the ship hadn't fully sank, and was floating on its back. The ship was equipped with the most modern life-saving technology at the time, so a lifeboat automatically detached when the ship capsized and stuck to the side of the ship, and An EPIRB, which sent the distress call automatically to many ships, also went off. Although the rescue by the authorities was incredibly slow, civilian rescuers were on the scene quite quickly. Although when the authorities did arrive, they brought diving suits and other life-saving equipment. A couple of people were in fact pulled from the ship, however, it was dangerous to enter due to all the cargo and the fact the ship could sink at any moment. Only 64 people made it off of the MV Joola. The last survivor was a 15-year-old boy, and he said that screams could be heard from the hull until the very last moment. The onlookers could only watch as the ship later sank, taking whatever people were still alive inside the ship with it. In the end, 1,863 people died when the MV Joola sank, making it the second worst ferry disaster in history after the MV Doña Paz in the Philippines. The Joola's wreck was only visited once. That was a couple days after the disaster. It was to find a couple bodies. In the end, 500 were recovered. It is a bit scary, however, thinking about the fate of those who may have still been alive by the end of the day when the rescue operations had concluded. If a person inside the ship was not killed by the water rushing in, they were indeed killed if the ship imploded. Divers saw many holes in the ship. They don't think this was from the cargo, but rather air that was kept inside the ship. As it was heading down to the bottom, the pressure made the ship implode. For a year after the disaster, people went back and forth blaming each other. The president blamed the captain, and the politicians never admitted overcrowding was a factor. Eventually, they concluded that there was no single factor, and that the sinking was an act of God. Many were very, very upset by the findings of this inquiry. Currently, the ship sits in only 70 feet of water in very clear conditions. Honestly, if anyone ever has the means to get out there, I'd say go for it. It sounds like a cool place, and plus, all of the bodies are probably gone by now, so you don't have to worry about that. Anyways, the MV Joola isn't talked about much despite the horrible tragedy. Today, another Senegalese ferry replaces the Joola on her route. There have been no problems with this one, and improved stability measures were fitted into the new one. Today, the Joola is only really remembered in Senegal, despite being an extremely horrible tragedy which took many lives. Due to the fact that the previous memorials were a bit of a downer, a new memorial is set to be built in Dakar, with an interactive museum talking about the disaster, and as of the making of this video, it's currently begun construction. So, will the Joola wreck ever be visited again? Does this remind you of a film from 2006? And what is that other ferry that currently does the route? That's a very good question.